Teacher in public is the most scary thing that can happen to you as a student because teachers are not supposed to exist outside of school. So what if I told you that one day I saw my teacher out in the wild, but this happened to be one that I actually liked. So I thought I should go up to him and say hi. But the moment he saw me, he turned the other way and left as quickly as possible. Now at first, I didn't understand why, but once I figured out the whole story, you'll never believe why he was trying so hard to avoid me. But first, let me give you some background on this teacher. Mr. Johnson, which wasn't his real name, but once you find out what he did in this video, you'll understand why I don't want to use his actual name. But anyways, he was hands down my favorite teacher. This guy wasn't just your typical boring history teacher who reads straight from a textbook. He actually made class fun, and more importantly, he treated the students like friends. While other teachers would just ignore you unless you were causing problems, Mr. Johnson cared about all his students, even to the point where he would invite us to eat lunch in his classroom. He was the one teacher who genuinely seemed to care how we were doing outside of class too. Like, I knew some kids whose own parents didn't even care about them that much. He literally felt like a cool uncle, but everything changed after that day that I saw him in public. It was a Saturday evening when I went to go watch a Dodgers baseball game with my family. So we're at the game just watching, thinking about how I could have been the one on that field if I didn't have the hand-eye coordination of a donkey, when suddenly I spot a familiar face a few sections over from where I'm sitting. Who was it? None other than Mr. Johnson and a girl who I assumed was his wife. At first when I saw him, my heart dropped because in my mind, teachers do not exist outside of the classroom. Like, you're telling me that when the school day ends, they actually go home and live their own lives? I can't buy it. But after that quick anxiety spike of seeing my teacher in public, I was like, wait, I love Mr. Johnson. I should go up to him and say hi. I eat lunch in his classroom all the time. He'll probably be happy to see me. But then something strange happened. He looked over in my direction and we made eye contact for about a second. So I decided to wave to him, but instead of waving back, his eyes got super big like he just saw a ghost and he tried to act like he didn't see me at all. I was thinking, that's kind of weird, but maybe it was just something else that made him have that reaction, right? Until he took it a step further, because after that inning ended, he and the girl he was with got up, left their seats, and didn't come back for the rest of the game. I had no idea where he went. And you may think, oh, well, maybe he was just leaving the game early. But the game still had 2 hours to go. So leaving that long before it ended just wasn't normal. I spent the rest of the night trying to figure out what happened. Was I the reason he left? Was he trying to avoid me? Does he even like me at all? The more I thought about it, the weirder it seemed. Mr. Johnson had never acted like he was embarrassed to know me before, but by the time the game ended, I convinced myself that I was just overthinking everything. Maybe he really didn't see me. Maybe he left early because he wasn't feeling well. There was no way to find out exactly why he had the reaction he did, so I thought there's only one way to figure this out. Just ask him for myself when I get back to school on Monday. But when I went back to school that next week, things got weird because I walked into Mr. Johnson's first period history class expecting everything to be normal. But instead of him saying hi to me or at least acknowledging me like he usually did when I would walk through the door, this time I got absolutely nothing. I walked in, made eye contact with him, and gave him my usual nod. But when he saw that it was me, he looked right through me like I was invisible. At first I was thinking maybe he just had a rough morning or he was dealing with something stressful, so I didn't think too much of it. But then class started and things got even more weird super fast. I'm usually pretty talkative in this class because it's the only time I can yap where people are forced to listen. So when he asked a question about the Revolutionary War, I shot my hand up super quick, ready to answer. But he looked directly at me, paused for a second, and then called on the girl in front of me who didn't even have her hand raised. Okay, maybe he just wanted the girl in front of me to participate in class. No biggie. So I tried raising my hand again a few minutes later when he asked another question. But same thing happened. I raised my hand, we make eye contact, and then he calls on someone else who doesn't even have their hand raised. By the third time this happened, I knew something was up. Even other students in class were starting to notice because I was usually the go-to guy for answers. History was literally the only class I enjoyed outside of PE, so I would always be active in it. But the real punch to the gut came halfway through class. I pulled my phone out for literally 2 seconds just to check the time because the clock in class was broken. But when Mr. Johnson saw that, he stopped mid-sentence and called me out in front of the whole class. Tyler, put that phone away. You know better than that. This was confusing because he had seen me check my phone pretty much every day and he never said anything about it. He was usually pretty chill about stuff like that as long as you weren't disrupting class. But this time, it was different. The whole room went quiet and I could feel everyone staring at me. I mumbled an apology to Mr. Johnson and quickly put my phone back into my backpack. But I was completely confused. This was not the Mr. Johnson that I knew at all. So after class, I tried to approach him to just see what was going on with him. But when I walked up to his desk, he would barely look up from his papers. What do you need, Tyler? I really wanted to ask about seeing him in public, but I was too scared to at this point, so I just said something else. I just wanted to clarify about the assignment we have. So I'll explain in the handout. You should have everything you need in there. Okay, but I was just wondering if... Tyler, I'm busy right now. go figure it out. And then he turned his back to me and started writing something on the whiteboard. When he did this, I was completely stunned. The same teacher who would talk to me for as long as I wanted after class was now acting like I didn't even exist. And I knew that it couldn't just be a coincidence that he started treating me differently after I saw him in public. But I couldn't figure out why. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. It even got to the point where he wouldn't allow me to eat lunch in his room anymore. And when I'd raise my hand in class, he'd look right past me. When I tried to make conversation with him, he'd give me one-word answers and then find an excuse to move on from the interaction. But the worst part was my grades started slipping from this. I was used to having his help in class, so when it suddenly disappeared, I started to struggle. And when that happened, I knew I couldn't just let this keep going on. I had to figure out why he was being so weird that day at the baseball game. And I only had one idea to figure out how. It wasn't a good idea, and it was one that I was really scared to do, but it was all I had. The idea was to casually bring up the baseball game and see how he reacted. I wouldn't ask him about the specific game I saw him at. I would just bring up baseball as a conversation starter. So after class one day, I lingered around waiting for everyone else to leave. And then I said to him, "Hey, Mr. Johnson, did you catch the Dodgers game last night?" The expression on his face immediately changed. His whole body tensed up, and he got this nervous look in his eyes like I just asked him about his deepest, darkest secrets. And then he went, I haven't really been following baseball this season. Your next class is about to start though. You should get going." But here's the thing. I knew for a fact that wasn't true. We'd talk about baseball before. I clearly saw him at the game the other week. So why was he lying? So then I was like, okay, I've only got one option left. I just have to address the elephant in the room. "Oh, I just figured you were still following baseball because I think I saw you at the game last week." But he just cuts me off again and goes, "Tyler, you need to get to your next class now." I backed off immediately. I wasn't going to ask him any more questions because it was clear he was not in the mood to respond. His reaction confirmed that I definitely saw him at the game. And more importantly, he was definitely trying to hide something about it. But what was he trying to hide? And why would he care if I saw him there? And here's the thing that made this whole situation really confusing. He only changed the way he treated me. Like he was still this nice, chill teacher to all the other students. But the moment I tried interacting with him, he'd start acting like the principal from Matilda. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I was stuck. There was no safe way to figure out what happened without potentially making my grades even worse. But a few weeks later, something happened that changed the whole situation. Because our school made it to the playoffs for football, which, I'm gonna be honest, was pretty surprising because our team was trash. I hope no one from that team is watching this because you were all nice guys, but we were not good, let's be real. But since we were actually in the playoffs somehow for the first time in a while, everyone at school was excited. There was this big buzz around campus. Even the teachers were talking about it, saying that they would be at the game. You see where I'm going with this? Well, if you don't, what I'm saying is that in my mind, I thought this football game would be a good opportunity to see Mr. Johnson outside of school again. And maybe he would be different from how he'd been treating me in school. It rolls around and I'm at the game with my friends. Our whole student section was going crazy. The band was playing and we're getting demolished because, like I said, we were not good. I don't know if we paid the refs to get into the playoffs or something, but I don't know. So during the game, I scanned the rest of the stands to see if I could find Mr. Johnson. I looked, and then boom, I saw him. He was sitting with a woman again, just like at the baseball game. I took a deep breath and then made a decision that I'm still not sure if I regret or not. I decided to walk over and say hi. Not to confront him or ask uncomfortable questions, but just to interact with him and see how he responded. So I climbed up the bleachers until I was standing right in front of him. Mr. Johnson looked up and saw me approaching, and I swear the color on his face changed immediately. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, or worse, like he'd been caught doing something that he wasn't supposed to be doing. But unlike when I saw him at the baseball game, he knew that now he couldn't just leave and act like he never saw me. So once I got close enough, I said to him, "Hey, Mr. Johnson, how surprised are you that we're losing?" He forced this really uncomfortable smile and then said, "Oh, hey, Tyler, yeah, it's been a good game." But he sounded super nervous, which was really unusual for him. After he said that, there was this awkward pause where we kind of just looked at each other for a second, and I could tell he was really hoping I would just say goodbye and then walk the other way. But then the woman next to him cleared her throat, obviously expecting to be introduced. Mr. Johnson looked at her and then back at me, and I could tell he was panicking. His eyes were darting like he was looking for an escape route. Finally, he gestured toward the woman and said, "Tyler, this is my wife." He said it with this forced cheerfulness that sounded completely fake. The woman smiled and extended her hand and said, "Nice to meet you, Tyler. I've heard so much about Mr. Johnson's students." But when she reached out to shake my hand, she took her blanket off and I noticed that she was pregnant. I didn't say anything about it because I'm always scared to assume a girl is pregnant and then they're not, but it was pretty obvious. She was pregnant. I shook her hand and then said something polite back, but my brain was spinning. Also, side note, Mrs. Johnson, if you're watching this, you are a very, very beautiful woman. Lock in, Tyler. That is a married woman. Sorry. After I met his wife and I saw her up close, I noticed something. This was not the same woman I saw him with at the baseball game just a few weeks ago. There's got to be a reasonable explanation for this though, right? Maybe the girl at the baseball game with him was a coworker or his sister, but the way they were interacting with each other did not make it seem that way. Because at the baseball game, they were holding hands. Now, unless you're from Alabama, I don't think it's normal to be holding hands with your sister. So what did this all mean? I wasn't sure, but my mind was racing through all the possibilities, trying to find some innocent explanation. Maybe the first woman really was just a friend, and I had misread the situation completely. But I remembered how close they were sitting, how comfortable they looked with each other, and the fact that they were holding hands. I'm standing there, making small talk with his wife, nodding and smiling, while my brain is telling me that there is something seriously wrong with this situation. I was already nervous enough trying to talk to them because of how beautiful she was. But now, I had to have a normal conversation without bringing up the fact that I saw Mr. Johnson with another girl at the baseball game a few weeks ago. And let me tell you, during this whole conversation, Mr. Johnson looked absolutely terrified. I'd never seen him look so uncomfortable in my life. His wife was being really nice, asking me about my plans after graduation and how I was doing in my classes. Kind of sounds like flirting if you ask me. But anyways, I could barely focus. All I could think about is whether I should bring up what I saw at the baseball game. Do I ask about the other woman, or do I pretend like I didn't see anything? Part of me wanted to just blurt it out. Hey, weren't you with a different woman at the Dodgers game? But at the same time, I had a class to pass, and I couldn't risk doing anything that would make me do even worse in it. And this was when it really hit me. The reason he looked like he wanted to disappear anytime we made eye contact was because he thought that I knew something. I mean, what other explanation could there be? He's introducing one woman as his wife at a football game, but I saw him with a completely different woman a couple weeks ago. Either this guy has a really complicated family tree that I just don't understand, or he's cheating on his pregnant wife. And based on how nervous he looked, I'm pretty sure it wasn't the complicated family situation. But little did I know, I never should have assumed that I knew what was going on. And you'll figure out why very soon. Because the conversation was winding down, and I knew I had to make a decision. Do I say something, or do I pretend like I never saw anything? This was probably the only chance I was ever going to interact with his wife, unless we went on a date a little bit later. You may think the obvious thing to do is to protect myself and not say anything so class doesn't become awkward. But I'm the type of person that feels super guilty if I don't do anything in these situations. Like one time I clogged the toilet at my friend's house, but I was too embarrassed to tell him, so I just blamed it on his grandma. Still haven't owned up to what I did that day. Sorry, Grandma. Also, rest in peace. Anyways, I looked at Mr. Johnson one more time, and he was staring at me with this expression that was half hope and half terror. He was waiting to see what I would do, because I could ruin his life right in that moment. So I made my choice. I smiled, told his wife that it was really nice to meet her, and walked away without saying another word about the baseball game and what happened there. But just like I knew it would happen, as I walked back to my friend group, I had this disgusting feeling in my stomach. It felt like I was carrying this huge secret that I had never asked for, and I knew I had to do something about it. Walking back to school that next week was one of the most uncomfortable experiences I'd ever had. Every time I saw Mr. Johnson, I felt like I was going to explode from all the tension. But now, instead of just him being the one ignoring me, I was ignoring him too. And he could tell I was doing this. He knew that something was up. It was so awkward between us now. Before, he was just ignoring me and giving me the cold shoulder. But now, I could tell there was this layer of fear anytime he saw me. Like he'd seen me come down the hallway and literally change directions to go the exact opposite way. If we ended up in the same area, we would both make excuses to why we had to leave. This was driving me absolutely crazy. I couldn't take this anymore, and I wanted answers. I felt like I was on the Maury show waiting to find out the truth about the situation. So I had to do something to make myself stop going crazy. But what would be the best way to go about this? I couldn't just go up to Mr. Johnson and say, "Yo, did you cheat on your pregnant wife?" But I also couldn't just pretend like nothing happened because my brain would not let it go. I started thinking about all the different ways I could solve this without getting myself into trouble. Maybe I could casually ask other teachers if they knew anything about his personal life. But that seemed too risky. I wasn't tight with any other teachers like that, so it would seem really sketchy if I just went up to one of them and said, "Hey, Mrs. Garcia, do you know anything about Mr. Johnson getting a little too close with women that aren't his wife?" Like they'd be looking at me like an FBI agent trying to blend in if I said that. I couldn't find anything out on his social media because, like I said, his profiles were private. Plus, even if I could see his social media profiles, what was I looking for? Pictures of him with other women? Don't think he was that dumb. There was literally no way to safely investigate the situation without potentially making it worse for him, or especially for me. I was carrying around this huge secret, but I had no way to confirm if it was actually true or not. But also, part of me was wondering if I even wanted to know the truth. Like, what would I do with that information if I had it? Was I going to confront him? Tell his wife? How would I even do that? So I made the decision that I just have to let it go. I'm probably never gonna get answers about the situation, and I was gonna try to move on with my life. That seemed like the only option. But sometimes you can't stop fate. Because fast forward to the beginning of the next school year, when Mr. Johnson was no longer my teacher, and something happened that made everything else make sense. I was hanging out with some friends before our first class, and it was at this point when I overheard two teachers talking to each other. Teachers are always yapping about nonsense, so I wasn't really paying attention until I heard one of them mention Mr. Johnson. And after listening a little closer, I heard them say that Mr. Johnson's divorce was finalized over the summer. So this meant there were two possible things that could have happened. Number one, Mr. Johnson and his beautiful, gorgeous, stunning wife, hit me up by the way. But anyways, they were in the middle of getting a divorce and seeing other people when I saw him at the baseball game. Or number two, the reason they ever got a divorce in the first place was because his wife found out about the girl that he took to the baseball game. Moment in your life where you came closest to death? I'm about to tell you what this exact moment was for me and why it made me decide that I will never attempt to break into an abandoned building. So me and my friends decided to go to the beach one day, but we weren't planning on going to just some normal beach. No, this was a private one where many of the richest people in Los Angeles would go. Lady Gaga, Miley Cyrus, Jonah Hill, all names of people who had houses on this beach. So in our attempt to cosplay being rich, we wanted to sneak into it. But as we're driving up to the beach, seeing all these ginormous houses, we see one in particular that catches our eye. Because this mansion stood out like a cat in a dog park. How so? Well, all the other houses were super nice and well kept, but this one was different. Windows were broken, graffiti on the walls, grass was way overgrown, so it was pretty clear that this one was abandoned. But it was so weird that in a place like this, there would be a house that someone would just completely stop using. Like, who has enough money to own a mansion in one of the most expensive areas of California and just abandon it? Not me and not you. That's right, we're both broke. So after seeing this abandoned house, me and my friend saw a golden opportunity. We had to try sneaking in this house. Cause how often do you get to go inside a mansion, let alone an abandoned mansion, on the beach? Now, although it was pretty obvious that this place was clearly abandoned, we wanted to make sure that no one was currently living there. So we Googled abandoned mansions in Malibu just to see if this one would come up. And sure enough, it did. Which led us to discovering that this place belonged to a lady named Cynthia Beck. That's a very important name that you'll need to remember for later. Now, from what we read, Cynthia abandoned this house in the early 2000s, so no one was there. I guess she owns a bunch of properties that she never visits, including this one. So technically, someone did own the place, but at the same time, we knew there was no chance that anyone would be there, right? So we decided to go explore it. But what we didn't think about is how powerful someone with this amount of money could be. And that mistake would ultimately get us into big trouble later in the day. But anyways, we made our decision. We drove down the road, found inconspicuous parking, and walked back our way to the mansion. Getting inside the place was surprisingly easy. The huge, intimidating front gate had a gap in the fence where we could sneak under it one by one. But as I've said before, sometimes I think I'm schizophrenic because whenever I'm in a situation like this, I always think someone is watching me, even if there's no reason to. So I kept looking over my shoulder, just having a gut feeling that we would get caught. Little did I know, something much worse would happen than just getting caught. Once we got past the gate, things started to get really uncomfortable. We walked up to the front door and we're trying to think of ways to get inside. Should we try getting through a window? Should we try picking the front door lock? But then something amazing happened. My friend pulled on the front door knob and it opened. Who would have thought? We could have just tried opening the door. So we stepped inside. Now, the moment I got into this house, goosebumps started to crawl all over my skin because this house fell straight out of the Great Gatsby movie. Now, I've never actually watched that movie before, but I just assumed this is what it was like because it wasn't modern. It had super cool, unique architecture. And what do I mean by that? Well, for starters, there were walls that looked like they were made out of literal gold. I don't know what they were actually made out of, but that's what it looked like. So that kind of gives you a vibe for what the house was like. But after looking around the house for a couple seconds, I saw something that started to make me really uncomfortable. But those aren't even the craziest things that were in there. Because what we discovered later in the house made us realize that this place was much more than just an abandoned building. I don't know why, but I felt like I had a TikTok accent when I just said that. Do y'all think I have a TikTok accent? This has nothing to do with the video, but just let me know. I need to know. Anyways, these personal items we found made a super unsettling atmosphere. Like, there was one room that clearly must have been for a child. There was stuffed animals and building blocks arranged as if a family was just living there, and out of nowhere, they just disappeared. And after leaving the children's room, we went to the basement, and this was when things started to get weird. Because the basement revealed a huge surprise. We got to the bottom of the stairs, and what do we see? A vault that looked straight out of a heist movie. There was a massive steel door with one of those levers that you spin around to open it, and it was slightly open, just enough for us to squeeze through it. Now, I don't know how any of you guys watching this grew up, and maybe I'm in the minority here, but I did not grow up with a bank vault in my house. A piggy bank with 80 cents in it? Yes. But a vault that looks straight out of Maze Bank? No. If any of you guys grew up with this and I'm just out of the loop, please let me know. I want to stay with you. But because I've never seen something like this in a house before, it felt really strange. So of course we stepped inside hoping that we just hit the jackpot, but unfortunately, it was empty. What did I kick? A bullet. Now I had no idea why this was in there, but I was also too dumb to question it, so I just kept moving along. But then I started to think, what would be so valuable that you would need to put a bank vault inside your house? Was the Krabby Patty formula hidden in there? That was my best guess. But as we're exploring the inside of this vault, we heard the last noise you would ever want to hear when you're in this situation. A car right outside. My friend whispered, "Did you guys hear that?" And the terrified looks on our faces confirmed that we did. At first, we just thought it was someone who had the same idea as us and wanted to explore the place. But then we remembered, we had to hop a gate to get onto this property. So the only way for a car to get onto this property was to open the gate. It was huge, so they had to know how to open it to get through. And what did this mean? Whoever opened that gate wasn't just another person who was trying to explore this place. No, it was someone who had been here before. And we didn't know what to do. So we just stood there frozen, trying to be as quiet as possible and listen to what whoever was out there was gonna do next. My heart then started to pound even more because we heard one door shut, then two doors, then three doors, then four. It was clear this wasn't just one or two people. No, it was a big group. Then came the footsteps. Numerous, heavy footsteps. They were getting closer and closer and sounded as if they were running. And it made it super clear that whoever they were coming after us. We were at the bottom of a basement with no other way out and heard what sounded like a dang millipede chasing us with all those footsteps. So we just kind of stood there waiting for whoever this was. We knew we couldn't do anything else. They obviously knew we were here and there was nothing we could do about it anymore. So I just hit that dog pose. I pretty much accepted that we were cooked. But as the footsteps got closer, eventually we heard the front door slam open. This wasn't Tinkerbell opening the door. It sounded like my mom after I didn't put a dish away and she came running into my room. That's how much force they put into opening that door. And then we heard screams.
"Anyone inside needs to come out with their hands visible."
My first instinct was, oh my gosh, it's the police. I'm about to get arrested. I should run and get out of here. But my second instinct was, you're an idiot. I don't know when I started thinking I could outrun the police, but it wasn't gonna happen. So me and my friends are just standing there frozen, shaking, having no idea what to do. None of us said a word. Like, what exactly are you supposed to do in this situation? Please, let me know. Cause listen, I've seen those videos before where people get raided by the police, and I know that if you make any sudden movements, you're putting yourself in danger. So I just stood there like the mannequin in Target that I used to be slightly attracted to. I was like this. Because we weren't making any noise, this group of people that just got into the house still didn't know where we were at. So I could hear them methodically moving through the house room by room. They had heavy boots on the ground with radio chatter in the background. But the scariest part was, you could literally hear the sound of weapons as they were jogging around. Then suddenly, the basement door swings open. 4 officers in tactical gear with helmets on and the word police across their chests. And they had weapons drawn and aimed directly at us. I could see the serious look on their face behind their visors. Not a single one of them thought that we were just some harmless teenagers. And as they make eye contact with us, they go, "On the ground now! Hands where we can see them!" So we went face down on the ground, which was pretty messed up to make us do, by the way, because the ground was dirty. And I also had one of my favorite shirts on. That got ruined. Like, you couldn't just have your weapon drawn at me while I was standing up? When they told us to get down, I dropped so fast my dang chin hit the floor. So all 3 of us were face down on the ground with the police having their weapons pointed right at us. And I remember lying there, cheek pressed against the cold floor, dust filling my nostrils with every terrified breath. And all I could think was, whatever's about to happen next, can y'all just please not tell my mom about this? If she found this out, she'd ground me till GTA 6 came out, which means forever. So they pressed their knees into our back as someone zip-tied our hands. "We've got 3 suspects secured," one officer said into his radio. I wanted to explain that we were just stupid kids trying to explore an abandoned mansion, but when you're face down with a weapon pointing at your back, for some reason, you don't really feel like talking back. Then they pulled me and my friends upstairs one by one. Then they sat us against a wall like a lineup in some police drama. All of a sudden, the lights inside the house came on. They knew exactly where the switches were. I didn't even know someone still paid the electric bill for this place. But when those lights came on, I was able to get my first look at just how serious this response was. Because this wasn't just local cops. It was a specialized unit with equipment that probably cost more than my college fund, all for me and my 2 friends. They had a full SWAT team out here just to arrest Dumb and Dumber. Then they started asking us questions. "What's in your backpack?" one officer demanded, gesturing to our bags that we dropped when we got inside. And something that wasn't funny at the time but is super funny to think about now is when they asked this question, my friend tried to answer, but his voice cracked so hard because of how nervous he was that he had to repeat what he said. I thought he was about to pee his pants because I said I was scared of what my mom would do if she found found out about this, I couldn't imagine what his mom was about to do because she used to be in the military. I knew that whatever ended up happening in this situation, I was probably never going to see him again. Either because we were going to jail or his mom was going to ship him off to some boarding school in the middle of Asia somewhere. But then he gathered his voice and answered the question. Just our phones and waters, officer. And I could tell they thought that we were trying to steal stuff inside this place. So I told the officer, like, we're not trying to steal anything, sir. He gave me a look that clearly said he did not believe a word I just said. But then one of them dumped out the backpack, carefully examining my phone and the water bottles in it, and he threw away the granola bar I brought as a snack. Not cool, officer. But after looking through the whole bag, I guess it was pretty obvious that we weren't professional thieves. No tools, no weapons, nothing in there that suggested that we were there for any other reason simply than being nosy. So with us still in handcuffs, they finally put the weapons down. And for the first time, I was able to gather my thoughts a little bit, with the first one being, why would a whole SWAT team come to an abandoned building just to arrest a couple of kids for trespassing? Unfortunately, I got the answer, but it wasn't one I was hoping for. The officers radioed in saying, we've secured the premises and detained 3 juvenile trespassers. So that basically confirmed that I was gonna go to jail that night. I accepted that already. So at this point, my thoughts switched from, please don't make me go to jail, to, please don't make me share a cell with Diddy. Then the officer asked a question that we didn't understand at all. He said, who sent you? Like someone would actually hire 3 idiots to break into an abandoned mansion. But apparently, the reason they asked this was because this abandoned house was much more complicated than we realized. And I said, he's telling the truth, officer, trying to not look intimidated, even though a pee stain was probably going down my leg at that very moment. Then the officer got me worried because he said, you guys do realize that this isn't just a normal abandoned building, right? You triggered a silent alarm the moment you stepped onto this property. So I said, officer, we honestly don't know anything about this place. It looked completely abandoned from the outside. We just wanted to see what it looked like on the inside and maybe take some cool pictures. Then the lead officer exchanged looks with his partner, who still had his weapon by his side. Breaking and entering carries serious consequences, especially with a property of this value. The penal code treats this differently than any other normal abandoned building. Another officer that must have been the good cop in this relationship was looking through our backpacks, and then he said, just phones, water bottles, and a granola bar. No tools, no spray paint. Nothing that suggests intent to vandalize or steal. When he said this, I got my first sign of hope. The kinder officer knelt right beside us and said something that made a whole lot of sense. As he went, this property has motion sensors around it, and you guys triggered the silent alarm. When these alarms are triggered, the security company that the owner of this house pays a lot of money to have immediately responds to it. They contact law enforcement, and because of the value of this property, we respond with adequate force. So that's why they had so many people and they were taking this so seriously. And what this means is that if the security company ever alerts the authorities that my house is being robbed, they're gonna respond by sending a mall cop. The nicer officer could tell that we were super terrified and that we weren't threats. So he tried to calm us down a little bit and he said, look, our protocol when responding to high-value property alarms is to secure the premises first and ask questions later. We have to treat every intrusion as potentially dangerous until proven otherwise. Which made sense. If there was someone actually dangerous in here, you have to prepare like it so you don't get hurt. But then the officer said something that once again made me think I was not going home that night, which was, now the owner hasn't been here in years, but it's still not legally abandoned. Someone is actively paying for security monitoring and they want trespassers prosecuted. So when they said this, I asked the golden question that me and my friends were all thinking. Officer, does this mean we're going to jail? Thinking about the cell I was about to have to share with Diddy, I waited for an answer. But then the officer went, no, we're just going to issue you guys a formal warning. But understand, you got lucky today. Trespassing on properties like this can result in serious charges, especially when you force entry. And to this day, I never told my mama about it. Middle of the night, a loud scream roars throughout the forest. You instantly wake up, feeling terrified. And you look over at your friend to see if he heard the scream too. But when you peek over at their sleeping bag, you notice they're gone. You quickly get out of the tent to look for them, when suddenly you see their phone on the ground. And on that phone is a blurry picture of the woods with a stranger's face in it. And that's when you realize something serious just happened. Because this is how a camping trip with my friends went one time. And I'm gonna tell you exactly how it started and how this nightmare trip ended. So it all began when my friends asked if I wanted to go camping one weekend. And I figured it'd be good to touch grass for the first time in a couple of years, so I said yes. My friend Matt was the one who originally brought up the idea. He had a whole plan for how the weekend would go. He said there was a camping spot about an hour and a half from where we lived and that it was super cool. But here's the part he didn't tell us. This camping spot wasn't an official campground. It was just a cool looking spot next to the lake that pretty much only locals knew about. He found it through a Reddit post, which in hindsight should have been red flag number 1. Like we all know, nothing good comes from Reddit, only freaky stuff. But we didn't know that going in, so we all agreed that we were down. The plan was simple. Friday to Sunday, pack light, be ready to rough it out a little bit. Because this was real camping. There wasn't going to be any service, no power, no bathrooms. We didn't want to be those people that say we're going camping, yet we sleep in a king-size bed. Nah. We were trying to do it like our ancestors thousands of years ago. But you know what this meant? No doom scrolling for a whole weekend. Now here's the thing. Even though we're all big boys, we prepared for this trip like how middle schoolers would. My friend Jaden brought 5 bags of chips and literally nothing else. My friend Aaron forgot his sleeping bag entirely, and I brought the baby oil. No, I'm just kidding. Or am I? But anyways, point is, we didn't prepare like we should have at all. And that would really come back to bite us once we went on the trip. We all piled into one car and hit the road Friday afternoon. And the drive there was amazing. Good music, good food, good conversations. It felt like one of those coming of age movies where nothing bad happens. But as we got further out of the city, the scenery started to change. The roads narrowed, the trees became more dense, and the towns got smaller. At one point, we passed through this place called Linton Hollow, which had one gas station, a post office that looked abandoned, and a 24-hour diner with a sign that literally said, "Try our possum pie." So yeah, we were getting deep into the rural areas. After another 30 minutes on back roads, we pulled up to this dirt trail, and that's where we parked. That was the end of the line for the car. From here, it was a short hike into the woods to get to the spot where we were gonna set up camp. And this is where we should have started to get worried. Because as we're unloading our stuff from the car, this old guy walks by us on the trail. Probably in his late 60s, big beard, camo jacket, the kind of guy who looks like he lives out here. But if you've ever met someone that lives in the woods full time, let's just say they're usually a little different. Normally harmless, but not always. And in this case in particular, he was far from harmless. He gives us a glance, not unfriendly, but not very warm either. Then he nods and says, "Y'all heading in?" We nod back and tell him, yeah, we're just here for the weekend. This guy pauses, looks out towards the woods, and then says, "Well, y'all be careful out there. It gets real easy to get stuck in these woods after dark." And then he just kept walking, which, objectively speaking, I don't think that's how you want a conversation with the random man in the woods to end. Because that didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a precursor for something bad that was about to happen. But whatever, we kept hiking. And after about 15 minutes, we reached the camping spot. And it was beautiful. A wide open space surrounded by huge trees right by the lake. There was a perfect flat spot for tents. The water looked so still that it almost seemed fake. Sun was still up, weather was still great, and we had this whole place to ourselves. Or so we thought. We get everything set up. Tents pitched, firewood gathered. But as we're doing all this, we hear a voice from behind us. "Looks like you boys got the whole place to yourselves, huh?" We all whip around, and it's the same guy from before. Camo jacket, big beard, same thick accent, just standing a few feet from the edge of the trees as if he had been watching us for who knows how long. And remember, it took us about 15 minutes to walk from the car to get to the location we were camping at. So the odds of him randomly being in this same area were incredibly low. But we brushed it off and just played it cool. One of my friends just kind of laughed nervously and said, "Yeah, looks like we do got the whole place to ourselves." The guy just smiles and goes, "That's good. Used to be real busy around here, but folks don't usually come out this way no more." He pauses again, as if he's trying to decide whether to say more or not, and then he just goes, "Well, y'all have a good night." Then he just disappears back into the forest. We shake it off because it's daylight, I'm with my friends, and if anything were to happen to us, all I gotta do is be faster than one person. And luckily, my boy Jaden is slow. I'm not kidding. That man is slower than a girl responding to my text, so I was good. Eventually, the sun starts to go down and we build a fire. Now this is where the vibe starts to shift, because no matter how old you are, the moment you get around a campfire with your friends, you're gonna start telling scary stories. You don't even choose to do it. It just happens. So we start all sharing ones that we know. Jaden tells one about a man who went missing in the woods and was found years later living in a cave, convinced that he never left his hometown. Aaron tells a real one about his brother's friend who went camping in Utah, and when he came back, he was genuinely convinced that Bigfoot was real. Like, it completely changed him. Then Matt, of course, who always says the stupidest things, tells a story that made no sense. Something about a werewolf, a flashlight, and Walgreens. But it felt like one of those rare nights where everything was just perfect. Just us, the woods, and the fire crackling in the middle. Eventually it gets late, around 1 in the morning, and we're all ready to go to sleep. So we grab water, start putting the fire out, and we head for our tents. Now something I should mention. We set up 3 tents. Jaden and Aaron in one, Eli and Matt in another, and me solo. Because I talk a lot in my sleep, and I guess no one wanted to get serenaded by my beautiful voice. Which is fine, whatever. I prefer to sleep by myself anyway. I definitely did not want to snuggle with the homies. I promise.
They ask you how you are, you just have...
So we all zip up our tents for the night, and now the woods are silent. And eventually, I fall asleep. But then at some point during the night, I wake up to a loud scream. It was just one word. "Hello!" It sounded like someone yelling from the middle of the woods, but not in a scared, help me way, just hello? Like they were calling out to no one in particular, just throwing it out there in case someone or something responded. My eyes snapped open and I instantly sat up in my tent because the sound didn't seem that far away. Now, my initial thought wasn't ghost or creepy guy from earlier. At first, I thought it was one of our friends messing with us. I figured one of my friends, probably Matt, was trying to just freak us out. He was way too excited about the creepy storytelling earlier, and I would not be surprised if he just thought it would be funny to prank us at 3 a.m. So I unzip my tent and just peek out a little bit. Everything is still. The fire's completely out. The moonlight is making it so you can kind of see into the distance, but not much because of how thick the forest is. And none of my friends' tents are moving or lit up. So either my friends were super committed to this bit, or they didn't hear the sound that I just heard. I sit there with my face poked out of the tent, just listening, but it's just silence. So then I whisper, Matt. No response. I whisper louder, Matt, if that was you, no one thought that was funny, bro. Still nothing though. So I finally unzip the rest of my tent, walk out, and head towards my friend's tent. Theirs were all still zipped up tight. So now I'm starting to think, did I just imagine that sound? Was I dreaming it? I'm literally standing in the middle of where we were camping, trying to figure out if I just hallucinated that voice or not. But then that's when I noticed something. Matt's shoes. They weren't outside the tent anymore. Earlier in the night, I saw them lined up right next to his tent. Bright red Converse. Hard to miss them. But now, they were gone. So I crouched down and whispered, Matt. No answer. So I unzipped their tent slightly just to peek inside. But when I do that, my heart drops into my stomach. Because Eli's inside, alone. I'm staring at the tent, and half of it is empty. Matt's half. And what's weird was, his shoes? Gone. His phone? Gone. No sign of him anywhere. And Eli was still dead asleep like he was training for the Olympic Games of napping. So I whisper his name. Eli. No response. Dude, wake up. But nothing can get these guys up. So I crawl halfway into his tent and start tickling him. Whoa. Hey, he practically jumps out of his sleeping bag like he's in a military drill. Whoa. What time is it? I don't know. Like 3? Do you know where Matt went though? What do you mean do I know where Matt went? Look next to you. He's not here. Oh, well, he literally just was here. I unzip the rest of the tent and tell him that we need to look for Matt because I heard someone screaming in the forest. So he starts to wake up and we get out of the tent. Eli's doing this thing where he's trying to rationalize it. Okay, well, maybe he just needed to take a dump or something. At 3 in the morning? I mean, you've never had post-campfire stomach problems? We did have a lot of s'mores, so fair point. But still, that doesn't explain the screaming in the woods. We scan the area around the tent. There's no light coming from the forest. No sounds, just the soft slosh of the lake a few hundred feet away. I grab my flashlight and we walk over toward Jaden and Aaron's tent. Guys, wake up. They unzip their tent and Jaden pokes his head out. Dude, it's like 3 a.m. What? Matt's gone. Gone where? We don't know. Aaron sits up in the tent behind him. What do you mean gone? We gather around in the middle of the campsite. Me, Eli, Jaden, and Aaron. Everyone now up and on edge. I explain everything. The voice that woke me up, Matt not being there, his shoes and phone being gone, and him not answering when I called out to him. Jaden's like, okay, hold up. He's probably just messing with us. You know how he is. I wanted to believe that, but it just didn't add up. So Jaden grabs a flashlight. Matt, bro, where are you? We all wait, but we don't get a response. So Aaron joins in. Yo, come on, Matt, don't do this again. But after about 10 minutes of doing this, looking for him, he doesn't respond. And don't get me wrong, Matt can be a troll, but he would never take it this far. So we split into 2 pairs. Jaden and Aaron head left toward the lake. Eli and I take the trail leading into the woods. We walk for maybe 5 minutes, calling Matt's name, searching for anything. A shoe, a flashlight, a sarcastic voice going, gotcha. Yes, that is exactly what Matt sounds like, by the way. But instead, we find a clue we really wish we didn't find. His phone. Just sitting there in the dirt, maybe 30 feet off of the trail. The flashlight is still on. His screen is unlocked as if he was trying to use it before he lost it. So we pick it up and there's a photo on the screen. It was a blurry one, as if it was snapped quickly, mid-motion. Most of the picture is just darkness and tree bark, but in the bottom left corner, barely visible, there's a sliver of someone's face. Not Matt's, because it was grainy, but I could tell that the hair color wasn't his. Matt has brown hair, and this was gray. Eli and I stare at each other for a solid 10 seconds without saying anything. And then he says what we were both thinking. That looks like the guy from earlier. Yeah, it does. Before we can say anything else, we hear rustling behind us. We both whip around with our lights up, but nothing's there. Then, a whisper cuts through the dark. But it's not from ahead of us. It's from behind, closer to the lake. It was soft this time, almost as if we were being messed with. Hello? Eli and I don't want to see where it came from, so we sprint back towards the campsite. When we get there, Jaden and Aaron are already back. You guys find anything? Just his phone. We show him the picture and all agree that the person in the bottom left corner looks like the man from earlier. This is when we all agree that it is no longer a prank. It's not funny anymore. We need to take this seriously. We stood in a circle near the campfire as we were discussing what to do. Jaden threw his phone in anger and said, "I don't even have any service. If this gets worse, we're done." We all tried making sense of the picture we saw on Matt's phone. Why would he take a picture like this? And why wouldn't he come back? Or was he not the one to take the picture at all? Nobody had a good answer. And honestly, I was trying not to spiral, because the more I thought about that blurry figure in the photo, the camo jacket, the beard, the hair, the fact that we saw that exact guy earlier, the more I started to wonder, what if he never stopped watching us? What if he was still out there, just watching, waiting for us to go to sleep? I took a deep breath, and then I said, okay, here's what we do. We do one more search together, looking for Matt. And if we don't find him, we go back to town and try to get help. Matt, if you can hear us, say something. As I'm shining my flashlight around, it lands on a tree, but there's something carved into it, a huge X. I aim the flashlight a few trees over, and there's another X. Same height, same angle, as if it was a trail marker. But for what? Aaron whispers, okay, does anyone else feel like it's a bad idea to follow these X's? But this is our best lead, so we ignore them and keep walking to the next one. We find a third X carved into a tree, and right at the base of that one, under a couple of leaves, what do we see? A sock. A single, damp sock. We all freeze trying to figure out if that could be Matt's sock, because it was still kind of white, so it didn't look like it had been there for long. Aaron backs up a step and goes, okay, this is getting out of hand now. We need to go back and get help. We turn around to retrace our steps, but something's wrong, because as we're walking back in the direction we're supposed to go, that's when we see smoke. So we head towards the smoke, and maybe a few hundred feet away, we see a cabin in the middle of the woods, alone. That's never led to something bad before, right? Smoke is drifting from the chimney of it, and when we see it for the first time, we're all thinking the same thing. Matt might be inside there. Everyone's looking at each other, trying to decide which type of regret they'd rather have. Walking into danger, or walking away from a friend. Finally, Jaden sighs and goes, okay, let's check. We have to check the house. So we creep towards the door, and it was already halfway open. So when we got close to it, we shined our flashlights inside. It was clearly someone's cabin, but as we're shining the light through it, we see a bed, and laying on it is a person with a beard. Yeah, it was the guy from earlier. Once our flashlight hit him in the face, we immediately got away from the front door so it didn't look like we were trying to break in. He obviously saw the light, so he came outside himself. Then he stared us all in the eyes, and then he smiled. So we're all confused as to what's happening now, and without saying a word, he points to the corner of the house. We edge a little closer to see what he's pointing at, and that's when we see Matt's backpack. In that moment, I knew one thing must have happened. This man ate Matt. Nah, I'm just kidding. But we did ask him where Matt was, and he told us to come inside. Against our best judgment, we did. And fully asleep, laying on his couch, was no other than Matt. We woke him up as fast as possible, and this is how he reacted. What are you guys freaking out about? Dude, why are you here? What happened? Oh, I got lost in the woods trying to find a good place to poop, and when I screamed out seeing if anyone could hear me, this man got to me. Luckily, he took me into his cabin and said I could stay here for the rest of the night until it was light outside so I could find my way back to you guys in the morning. Apparently, this mysterious forest man was just being a nice civilian and giving our friend a place to sleep because he was lost. But also, remember how I said he followed us about 15 minutes into the woods that day? Yeah, well, it turns out that guy owned about 50 acres of land in that forest. So we were technically trespassing onto his property in the camping spot we were at. So he was just watching us to make sure we weren't doing anything bad since we were on his property. But knowing that we were trespassing on his property, he never even kicked us out. He just wanted to make sure that we didn't do anything bad. So if you guys see a creepy looking man in the middle of the forest, odds are they're pretty cool. So go into their cabin. No, I'm just kidding. Empty classrooms and strange shadows when all the lights go off. Well, I always did. But I found out what really happens the hard way when my friends and I decided to sneak into school at night. But what started as a fun adventure quickly turned into a night I'll never forget, and not for a good reason. So my friend's dad is a teacher at the school we went to, and one day he comes up to me at lunch with this evil look in his eyes, and he pulls something out of his pocket. With a smile on his face, I can see that he took his dad's classroom key. I asked him why he took that off his dad's keychain, and he told me he didn't. Instead, he got a copy of the key. Now, I couldn't really understand why he would feel the need to do this, so I asked him, and that's when he brought up the idea. Dude, we should sneak into the school at night. Nobody would know. When he said that, I just stared at him like he was crazy, because I was trying to go to a good college, and the last thing I needed was to get busted for trying to break into my own school. Like, how am I gonna get into Hogwarts after doing something like that? But my friend wouldn't drop this idea. He just kept pushing it. Come on, we could literally do it next week, and no one would notice. Just think about it. I wish I had better judgment, but after a couple of days of him bringing it up, I decided that it did sound kind of cool. Like, we've all thought about what our school is like when no one's there, and there's something about being in a place that you're not supposed to be that just gets me super excited. So I was convinced. We made a plan to meet up at 10 p.m. that Friday. Once everyone goes home for the weekend, we were pretty confident that there would be no one left at school. We should have been smarter than to think that though, because on Friday night, when we got to our meeting spot behind the football field, I thought it was just gonna be me and him. But he brought his cousin too. I didn't expect him to do that at all, because I had no idea who this man was. I didn't know if he was gonna snitch or not. Whatever though, it's fine. When we finally got to the school doors, it looked super different at night. I never realized how much of an echo the school had when you would talk during the day, but now that we were here with no other noises, it was 10 times louder. We got to the front door of the school, and this is where things started to get nervy, because once my friend turned that lock to open up the door, it felt like there was no going back. And we weren't sure if that when we stepped inside, that would set off some sort of alarm or anything like that. So I was shaking when he put that key in, but it fit in perfectly, so he turned it, and there it was. That click sound. The door was officially unlocked. We all kind of looked at each other smiling for what we were about to do when we got inside. Once we actually stepped in, the hallways inside were super dark. We only used our phone flashlights because we were scared someone from the outside might see if we used a big one and they would call the police. But as we're walking through the hallways, our footsteps made these big echoes against the walls, and every little noise we heard made us freeze. We were trying to figure out where to go first, and we ultimately decided to go into a couple classrooms. You know, I had some beef with some certain teachers there, and I wanted to do something, to say the least. So I took a dump on Mrs. Schumer's desk. No, I'm just kidding. That was a lie. That was a lie, okay? Mrs. Schumer, if you're watching this, I did not take a dump on your desk, okay? That was not me. That was Gerald. But anyways, all the classrooms looked super creepy at night when it was completely dark. And every time we would go into one of the classes, it felt like someone was watching us. Whenever I got that little tingle thinking that someone was looking at me from behind, I'd turn around super quickly and look at them, thinking that I'd catch someone in the act, but there was never anything there. Sometimes I still do this when I think there's a ghost in my house. And one day, I'm gonna catch him. Okay, I thought I was gonna do it there, but I didn't get him. At first, it was really fun to be inside the school after we got over the fact that no one was in here with us. We ran around the halls, sat in the teachers' chairs pretending to be them, and my friend's cousin, well, he drew some inappropriate pictures on the teacher's whiteboard, to say the least. Now that I think about it, I don't know if he ever erased those. I wonder what the teacher thought when they showed up to school on Monday and saw those drawings. But we ended up wandering to the teacher's lounge, wanting to check out all the places that we weren't allowed normally as students. It low-key kind of looked like an insane asylum in there, with no light or anything. It was just kind of depressing. No colors on the wall. I don't know how teachers do this, but it was just cool to be in there in general. So we were laughing, enjoying this experience, until out of nowhere, my friend's face drops. And he looks at us with this confused expression on his face. Do you guys smell that? I hadn't noticed anything until he said that because my nose is clogged 25 hours a day. But then I took a deep sniff and there was a strong smell in the air. What exactly it was, I couldn't pinpoint. So we all started sniffing like a dog, trying to figure out what that smell could have been. And suddenly it got stronger and stronger. It wasn't the smell of food or cleaning stuff or anything I've ever smelled at school before, but we could kind of tell which direction the smell was coming from, so we figured it would be a good idea to go and try and find the source. We didn't realize just how bad of a decision this would be, because as we walked out of the teacher's lounge and into the hall, the smell got way more intense. The best way I could describe it is that it smelled like chemicals, but it also was burnt at the same time. Almost like when you leave something on the stove too long. But as we got closer and closer to where the smell was coming from, something that none of us had planned for happened. We realized exactly what the smell was. Smoke. It hit us right in the face. Once we thought we figured it out, we all kind of looked at each other with confused expressions on our face. None of us said anything at first, but the smell kept getting stronger as we were taking every step. It was almost as if it was spreading through the air vents, and it started to make my nose burn. Then, to confirm my suspicions, my friend says, Is that smoke? When he said this, I suddenly thought of what they always taught us to do in school when there's a fire. Line up in alphabetical order in a single file line, and then once everyone is there, we can walk out as a class. As someone with the last name Vitelli, I always knew I would have been cooked if there was a fire in school. I hated doing stuff in alphabetical order when I was younger. It's pretty much like being the first guy chosen in the 100 men versus 1 gorilla fight. Like, you know you're cooked. But this was when real panic started to set in. Was the school actually on fire? If it was, there were 2 reasons this would be terrifying. 1, because fire is obviously dangerous and we don't want to get hurt. But 2, if the school actually was on fire and we were the last ones seen at it before it happened, who are they going to think did it? Did he? Okay, no, I don't, brain rot, bro. I don't know why I'm saying this. But obviously, if we're the last ones seen at the school, they're going to think we did it. sorry, not again. My friend's cousin suggested that we leave right away because he already has a criminal record. Glad we decided to bring this guy to break in. But I was thinking about how guilty we would have looked if we left. So I knew if there was actually a fire, we needed to try our best to stop it. Otherwise, I would have been going to college at McDonald's University. That actually don't sound too bad now that I'm thinking about it. Damn, I'm hungry. So we stood there trying to decide what to do. My brain was jumping from one idea to the other. If we left and the school burned down, would they actually be able to figure out that we were the last ones here? Are there any security cameras at this school we don't know about? But if we stayed and tried to fight the fire, we might get trapped. Or worse. So we decided to go towards the smell just to see how big of a problem we were actually dealing with. We started walking towards where the smell seemed the strongest, which was down the hallways in one of the classrooms. With each step, the smell got worse. It was definitely some sort of chemical burning, which was making my eyes water and my throat scratchy. I kept thinking about how much trouble we were going to be in. Breaking into school was bad enough. Just that alone could get us suspended. But what if there was actually a fire and we didn't report it? What if the whole school burned down because of us? You know what that means? No school on Monday! No, but for real, that would have been bad, so we didn't want that to happen. Because my mom would have done way worse to me than the police ever could. So we were arguing about the next best step. We should call someone. Maybe the fire department. No way, are you crazy? Then we'd have to explain why we were here in the first place. What about your dad? He's a teacher. He might know what to do. My friend looked unsure, but he knew it was the right thing to do. So he pulled out his phone and dialed his dad's number. Ring, 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 ring. Straight to voicemail. So he tried again. Ring, 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 ring. Nothing. You can never rely on a teacher to pick up their phone past 10 p.m. on a Friday night. We both knew exactly what that man was doing right in that moment. So that was it. We were on our own with the problem getting worse and worse by minute. The smell was so strong now that I had to pull my shirt over my nose just to breathe. We followed the smell down the hallway, past the math classrooms, and around the corner. When we turned that corner, the smell suddenly got way worse than it had been before. And we also saw something to confirm our suspicions for the first time. Smoke coming from underneath the door. So we approached that classroom door carefully, as if it was about to explode any moment. And we tried to open the door handle, but it was locked. We tried peeking through the small window in the door, but it was so dark it was hard to see. The one thing we knew for sure, the smell was absolutely coming from inside that room. While pressing his face against the glass and cupping his eyes to block out the flashlight from our phones, my friend looked through the tiny window to see if he could see anything inside there. Maybe some smoke or just some sign that would help us out. But the darkness made it impossible. Although we knew we were onto something because of the smoke coming from underneath the door. Once again, we were back to deciding what to do. We needed to get inside that classroom. And then it hit me. The window, huh? This classroom has that window on the other side that faces towards the parking lot. They would always keep it cracked during the school days because it got so hot inside there. Shout out to our school for not having air conditioning, by the way. Maybe it's open right now. We knew that was our best and probably only chance to get inside that class. The three of us sprinted through the dark hallways with our phone lights bouncing all crazy off the walls, knowing how quick we needed to be if there was really a fire. Because we're from California. If there's one thing we know out here, it's fire. And these things can spread fast. So we burst through the exit doors trying to get to the parking lot. We slowed down when we got closer, trying to remember which classroom we were just by. They all looked the same from outside. Dark squares against the brick wall. And then my friend's cousin pointed to the one where the blinds weren't completely closed. That's gotta be it. The window was way higher up than I remembered. It was at least 8 feet off the ground. And I'm 6'8". So if I can't see into it, no one can. Yes, I am 6'8", guys. And I respect women, okay? Who want me? Seriously. I told the guys I was gonna need a boost to get inside, and they immediately crouched down and cupped their hands together to help me out. I stepped into their hands and they lifted me up. Once I could reach the window ledge, I was able to pull myself up enough to see inside. But what I saw made absolutely no sense. The room looked completely normal and empty. No fire, no smoke. Nothing spilled over inside, just dark lab tables and stools tucked underneath them. What do you see? Nothing. There's nothing inside here. Well, maybe it's not where the smell was coming from then. But the smell was way worse here than it was inside the hallways. It was leaking through the tiny crack I was peeking through, and it was making my eyes water. I tried pushing the window open wider so I could get a better look, but it was stuck. Probably because I haven't seen it move from that position since the whole time I was at that school. So I pushed harder using everything I had, and suddenly, it broke away. The window slid up about halfway, and now the smell was so bad that I felt like throwing up. Literally the first thing I did when that window opened more was gag. Oh my gosh, the smell is definitely coming from inside here. That's what I thought in the moment, not knowing the full truth about the situation. What is it? Can you see anything burning? No, that's the weird thing. It looked totally normal, except for the fact that the room was covered in some sort of haze, as if there was smoke in it recently. I pulled myself up higher, trying to get a better angle of the whole classroom, and I managed to squeeze myself halfway through the window, hanging in there like an idiot with my legs dangling outside of the building and my torso inside. I recalled to all the Final Destination movies I watched where someone passed away in a ridiculous cartoon way, just thinking I was next up. But I turned on my phone flashlight and panned it around. Desperate to find something that would explain the smell and the smoke. The tables were all clean. The cabinets were all closed. Nothing was knocked over or spilled. Guys, I don't understand, but the smell is definitely coming from inside here. Maybe it's like invisible gas or something. Which is what they said as they were still trying to hold my big back up. But the thought of invisible gas freaked me out. What if it actually was some dangerous gas that could poison us from breathing it in? Or what if it could explode? I've seen stories of people just passing away one night in their sleep because of the gases, and they had no idea that it was coming. So what if we were breathing in toxic chemicals right now? So I scrambled to get back out of that window, and as soon as my feet hit the ground, I backed away from the building, taking deep breaths of the clean night air. We need to get out of here. I don't know what's going on, but we need to leave. The possibility of those dangerous invisible gases really freaked me out. The guys didn't even try arguing. The freaked out look on my face must have been enough to convince them to leave. But we needed to figure out if we were just gonna leave without saying anything or actually try and solve this. We need to call 911. There might be a gas leak or something that could explode in there. Are you insane? If we call 911, they'll want to know who we are and why we were at school at midnight. If we do that, we're getting arrested. But what if the whole school burns down because we didn't tell anyone? We'd be responsible. As Dumb and Dumber were arguing, it felt like we were stuck in between two horrible choices. Either risk getting in serious trouble or risk being responsible for something horrible happening to the school. We decided we couldn't just leave if the school was in danger. Although we were terrified of getting caught, actually being the reason that something bad happened sounded even worse. But we knew calling 911 directly would mean us getting in trouble because of the questions they would have asked us. They ultimately would have found out that we were breaking into school, and that's how we found this smell. So we stood there trying to figure out what to do, when finally, I had an idea. What about calling the school's emergency number? You know, like the one they give the parents? We could call from a block number once we're far away, just say that we were driving by and smelt something weird, and that's it. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was something. Because our school had this number that you could call if you had any questions or concerns, and it worked 24 hours a day because it wasn't affiliated with the actual school. It was a separate company. So we decided to get out of the parking lot first, then make the call once we knew we were a safe distance away. The plan was to leave everything exactly like we found it so no one would know we were there, unless the camera saw us. Sorry. So we went back to my friend's dad's classroom first to make sure we didn't leave anything behind, and the smell wasn't as bad over there, so we figured that we would be okay. We checked the room quickly, making sure that nothing changed, and then we bounced. We ran for blocks without stopping, not saying a single word to each other, just trying to put as much distance between us and the school as possible. We finally stopped when we reached the park about half a mile away. All three of us stopped and laid on the grass, panting and coughing. Our lungs hurt from running so hard and from whatever that smell was that we were inhaling the whole time. So then my friend's cousin pulled out his phone and called the emergency number. We figured it would be safest for him to do it since he didn't actually go there. When the automated system picked up, he left a message about a chemical smell coming from the building. We sat in silence for a few minutes after that, all thinking the same thing. Were we going to get caught? Were there security cameras we didn't know about? Was the school itself going to be okay? We had to decide on a game plan to make sure that if anyone asked any questions, we all had the same answers. We agreed that we wouldn't talk about this to anyone, and if someone were to ask us a question about the situation, we would just deny. So that weekend was super nerve-wracking, not knowing what would happen next. But then, Monday came around. Now we had to go back to school. And I barely slept at all that weekend. The first thing I did when I got to school that morning was check out the classroom to see if anything happened to it. But when I walked by, it looked different. There was yellow caution tape across the door. And not like just a little strip. No, the whole doorway was crossed off with this bright yellow tape that said, "Do not enter." A bunch of students were crowding around the hallways trying to figure out what exactly it was. I tried to act normal as I walked past, just keeping my head down and looking through the weather in Cupertino. But a couple minutes before classes started, the principal's voice suddenly came over the intercom and said, "Attention students and staff. Because of an incident, classes in room 118 will be moved to the library until further notice." Which class was room 118? Yeah, you guessed it. The room with the caution tape over it. So what incident was the principal referring to? Is an incident what you call when 3 students break in and almost die from chemical fumes? Did they know we were there? Were they just waiting to pull us out of class and arrest us in front of everyone? Yo, low-key, that would be kind of hard though. Like imagine your crush watching you get arrested. That'd be kind of sick. Once lunch came, I was walking towards the cafeteria when I noticed 2 teachers talking outside of that room again. They kept pointing towards the room as if they were talking about it, so I slowed down to try and hear what they were saying. Peterson's always super careful with this stuff. Yeah, but you know how things like this can happen when students are messing around. I kept walking before they noticed me eavesdropping, but my mind was racing. When they mentioned students messing around, I definitely thought I was getting busted. And then, in the middle of history class, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I sneakily checked it under my desk, and it was my friend sending a text that said, "Did you hear? They're saying something about an experiment that went wrong in that classroom." So I finally worked up the courage to ask my biology teacher for answers, not wanting to do it before because I didn't want to look guilty. She wasn't as strict as some of the other teachers, so I felt more comfortable asking her. "Mrs. Ramirez, I was just curious about the caution tape on room 118. Do you know what's going on in there?" "Oh, nothing too serious. Just some chemical reaction because of some liquids that were left in beakers inside that class. Apparently the students didn't clean up after doing their science experiment." My heart started hammering in my chest. "Oh, that's good. Well, were the chemicals that were released dangerous or anything?" And that's when she told me there was a chemical reaction creating a compound called ammonium chloride. So I asked her about that chemical. And she told me that those fumes can cause respiratory problems if anyone's exposed to them. Well, that's great. So if I grow a 3rd arm or something when I'm older, you guys know why. But after asking her some more questions, apparently this compound can create smoke and a really strong smell, which explained everything that we were experiencing that night. As far as I know, no one else ever found out that we were at school when this. You might think sleep paralysis is simply a bad dream, and I used to believe that too. But everything changed when I experienced it for myself, and something that no scientific explanation could explain happened. Because the things I saw during sleep paralysis didn't just stay in my dreams, they followed me to my real life. So let's start from the beginning. It started about 2 years ago, and there I was, super excited about moving out of my parents' house for the first time. I was heading to college, and I was finally gonna get my first experience of independence. But I shouldn't have been so excited, because the place I was moving into for college raised some red flags immediately. Like the landlord for this place was a guy named Mr. Peterson, who always seemed paranoid. Whenever you would talk to him, he'd be looking around as if he was trying to keep an eye out for someone. And when I asked about the previous tenants at the place, he quickly changed the subject. But the biggest red flag should have been when I saw these weird headstones poking out of the yard right outside the building. Because I asked the landlord what they were, and he just told me they were some old statues that got worn down over time, but that was far from the truth. And if I knew what those statues really were from the beginning, I never would have moved in. The first night I slept there was actually pretty normal. I slept like a baby, which started to make me feel confident that I moved into the right place. No weird noises, no cold spots, no mysterious figures, just me snoring in my new bedroom. But things started getting a little weird when I was unpacking the kitchen, because I found this dusty black and white photo in the back of a drawer. It showed the land where my apartment now stood, but instead of a building, there was like a memorial site with flowers on it. I couldn't really depict exactly what it was though, so I thought it was interesting, but I didn't pay much mind at the time. A few days after moving in, I met my neighbor, an old lady named Mrs. Kang. We made some small talk about the building, and then she said something that stuck with me. "When living here, just remember to respect the history of the land and you'll be fine." When I asked what she meant by that, she just smiled and said that she needed to go do her laundry. A little weird, but I just figured it was one of those cryptic things that old people say when they don't make any sense. Like, you ever walked by an older person and they're just mumbling, so you can't tell if they're sneak dissing you or not? That's kind of what it felt like. About a week into living there, I started noticing small, strange things. Like how the temperature would drop in the corner of my living room, even though the thermostat was set to 75 degrees. Or how my bathroom door would be open in the morning when I was positive I shut it the night before. Little stuff that you just brush off. But then one night, I couldn't sleep, and I just decided to go down an internet rabbit hole researching about the building. I looked up how long it's been here, and that's when I found out that it was built in 1972. But here's the kicker. It was built on what used to be a cemetery. Y'all see where we're going now? The article mentioned that all the graves were relocated before construction, so I figured it wasn't a big deal. Lots of older neighborhoods are built on former cemeteries, right? Now, I don't know what they do with the bodies, but I'm sure it's okay. At the time, I actually thought it was kind of cool in a morbid way because I love spooky stuff. But then the night came where everything changed. A couple weeks after moving in, I've been sleeping pretty good every night up until this day. Because on this particular night, I went to bed like usual, but around 3 a.m., I suddenly woke up. My eyes opened, but that was it. The rest of my body just wouldn't move. At first, I thought I was still dreaming or something, so I tried to lift my arm, but it just wouldn't happen. I tried to sit up, but I couldn't. I was completely frozen. It was as if someone poured concrete on my whole body while I was sleeping. The only thing I could move were my eyes, which made it even more terrifying because of what I saw in my surroundings. I started panicking, trying to scream, but my mouth wouldn't open. And then I felt this pressure in my chest, almost as if someone was sitting on top of me. It got harder and harder to breathe, and I remember thinking, I can't die like this. I haven't gotten a haircut in forever. I'm gonna look so chopped at my funeral. And that's when I noticed the shadow, a dark shape in the corner of my room, right by my closet. At first I thought it was just one of my clothes hung up, but I'm too lazy to do laundry. I never had clean clothes hung up like that. This shadow was different. It had the outline of a person, just standing there in the darkness, watching me. I couldn't turn my head to get a better look, but I could see it from the corner of my eye. Then the shadow started moving, not walking, but almost gliding across the room. And it got closer and closer to my bed. It was going super slowly, and my heart was racing, felt like it was gonna explode. I was still screaming in my head, but nothing was coming out of my mouth. The shadow got closer and closer until suddenly, it was at the foot of my bed. This dark, human-shaped mass just standing there. I squeezed my eyes shut because I couldn't handle looking at it anymore. And when I opened my eyes again, I could move. Just like that, the nightmare was over. So I sat up gasping for air, turning on every light I could reach. The shadow was gone, so I checked the time, and it was around 3:30 a.m. I didn't go back to sleep that night. Just sat in bed with all the lights on, scrolling through the internet trying to figure out what just happened to me. And that's when I found some articles about sleep paralysis. According to what I read, sleep paralysis happens when your brain wakes up before your body does. Your body stays in sleep mode, so you're basically paralyzed, even though your mind is conscious of what's going on around you. The pressure on the chest, the feeling of being watched, even the shadowy figures that I saw, all symptoms of sleep paralysis. So I was sure this is what I was going through. But little did I know, it was so much worse than just sleep paralysis. Instead, it was something way more real. I texted my friend that I knew has had sleep paralysis before, telling them about my experience, and they replied back saying, it happens more often when you're stressed or in a new environment. So that totally made sense to me because I just moved in the week before. He reassured me that the dreams would go away once I got comfortable in the place, but that did not happen. At the time, I just felt so much better knowing that there was a logical explanation for what was going on. It wasn't ghosts or anything. Just my brain being stressed about living in a new place for the first time on my own. I wish that logical explanation was what really happened though. If only I'd known that this was just the beginning and it would get much, much worse. I thought I was in the clear after that first night. I had 3 whole days after this where I slept without having any problems. No weird shadows, no feeling trapped in my body, nothing. I really actually started to believe that it was just stress from moving into a new place. Then it happened again. But this time, way worse. I woke up around the same time, 3 a.m. completely frozen, just as I was before. Same time, 3 a.m. completely frozen, just as I was before. But when I looked towards my closet this time, it wasn't just a shadowy figure. Now, there was a man standing in front of my bed. I could see him more clearly now than the first time I experienced this. He was wearing some sort of old military uniform with that high collar and a button-up jacket. It looked straight out of something like World War I. His face wasn't totally clear to me, kind of blurry around the edges, but I could see his expression. And he looked angry. Not just regular angry, but like hateful, as if it was directed towards me. His eyes were locked on mine with intense stares that made my skin crawl. But after having the previous experience, when this was happening, I would just keep telling myself, it's just sleep paralysis, it's just sleep paralysis, it's just sleep paralysis. But this felt different from the first time. I'm confident I could hear him breathing. I didn't hear noises during that first experience, so I didn't know if this was supposed to be a part of it. He had super heavy breaths, as if he used to be a smoker in his past life, and he just stood there over me for what felt like forever. After a while, everything went black. And then when I woke up for real, it was finally morning time. The first thing I noticed after waking up was a picture I had hung up was crooked. I figured I must have just done that in my sleep, but wanting to see what that looked like, I decided I was gonna start recording myself when I went to bed. I wanted to encapsulate these sleep paralysis experiences to see what it looked like. So I set up my phone on my dresser, pointing towards my bed, and hit record when I went to sleep. I figured if I could prove to myself that nothing was actually happening, my brain would calm down and stop the hallucinations. At night, I had the sleep paralysis experience again. But the next morning when I checked the footage, there was nothing. Just me sleep talking. I started recording every night, waiting to find something, but it never happened. My sleep was getting worse and worse, and I'd wake up feeling like I didn't get any sleep at all. I was now falling asleep in class, having more dark circles under my eyes than I already have. The military man started showing up every night in these sleep paralysis nightmares, and each time he got clearer and clearer. As every night went on, I could start to see more details in what he was wearing. Medals on his chest, a big mustache, and a horrible looking wound on his neck that looked raw and wet, as if something happened to him on the battlefield. After almost 2 weeks straight of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my mattress and dragged it into the living room. From the stuff I read, I figured that maybe it was something about that room in particular that was causing me to have these hallucinations. Maybe the paint fumes or some kind of mold was triggering this in my brain. I was really hoping this would fix it. That night, I slept on the mattress in my living room with all the lights on. I even took the NyQuil that my doctor recommended to help me get better sleep. I was so confident that changing rooms would help. I really thought it would fix it. But I had no idea that what would happen next would make everything else feel like a pleasant dream in comparison. Because this trick didn't work. I had the same nightmare. So after this, I was out of ideas and I was a complete mess. I looked like someone who hadn't slept in a month, probably because I didn't, and my friend noticed right away when one night we went out to dinner. He took one look at me and was like, "Whoa, you look terrible. What's going on?" "Oh, I got Botox, you couldn't tell?" No, I didn't say that. But everyone who does get Botox usually does look terrible, so I don't really get why they do it. But that has nothing to do with the video. I wanted to tell my friend everything about the military man in my dreams, but I knew it would sound so stupid. So I just told him I was having trouble adjusting to living on my own, and I had insomnia. So he proposed the idea to sleep over at my place that night, and saying that it would maybe help me sleep better. Now, I don't know if he just wanted to do that because he was a good friend, or if it's because his roommate would always make their apartment smell like a nuclear waste site. But either way, I felt super relieved. I'd been stuck with these hallucinations for weeks, and the idea of just having a friend with me in that apartment made me feel so much safer. He came over that night, and we just chilled and watched movies. Unfortunately, he wanted to watch horror. Little did he know how much I was not in the mood for that. But for the first time in a few weeks, I felt normal. Just hanging out with my friend, making jokes, laughing. Around midnight, when he was getting tired, I offered him my actual room to sleep in because I hadn't slept in there in a couple weeks anyway at this point. So he asked why I'd been sleeping in the living room, and
Зимава магијата станува реалност со картичките Виза премиум. Патувањата стануваат попријатни, пазарењето се претвора во уживање, поволностите ве чекаат во светот. А со Виза Четбот, нивното активирање никогаш не било полесно. Користите ги поволностите на картичките Виза премиум и направете ја зимава незаборавна. Виза, секаде каде што сакаш да бидеш.
I just made up some story about how my room would always get too hot at night. So he took my bed, and I went to sleep in my makeshift bed in the living room. With the TV still playing quietly, and knowing that my friend was just down the hall, I felt comfortable to actually try and get some real sleep. The next morning, I woke up, and what do you know? I had no sleep paralysis that night. I thought I found the cure. It was all in my head. I just needed to have a friend over to calm me down. But then, my friend comes out of my room a little bit later, and I asked him how he slept. And this is what confirmed that this whole experience was way more than just sleep paralysis. Because my friend told me he really struggled to sleep that whole night. And at first I was like, "Yeah, sorry, I know, the bed isn't that comfortable." But then he was like, "No, the bed was fine. It was just that when I was sleeping, I was having these really weird dreams." Immediately that caught my attention. So I asked him to tell me more. And he goes, "Well, I had these dreams that I was in your room and there was a man in the corner, but I couldn't do anything about it." When he said that, I felt like I was being pranked. Because remember, I never told my friend anything about what was actually happening to me at night. I just told him I couldn't sleep good. Nothing else. So he had no way of knowing what I was experiencing. I decided to not tell him anything at all about what I was going through at night because I couldn't think of a rational way to say it without sounding crazy, especially since he just experienced the exact same thing. Because I knew this wasn't just in my head anymore. Either we were both randomly having super similar hallucinations or something was going on inside that building.
Something real.
So I decided it was time to figure out who this military man was and what this all meant. The next morning, I looked up the history of military in the area I was now living in to see if there were any ties it could have had to my apartment. I didn't really know exactly what I was looking for. I ain't no mystery solver like Scooby-Doo. I was just kind of throwing stuff at the dartboard and seeing what stuck. But that was when I discovered that a big part of the Civil War was fought in the city I was in. That was interesting to me, but it still didn't put any of the clues together. When I found out this information about the war, I decided to ask my history professor about it to see if he could give me more details. And he's yapping to me about it, but there's one thing he said that really caught my attention because he goes, yeah, there actually used to be a military cemetery from the Civil War right on campus. What? Then he told me that unfortunately, they tore those cemeteries down recently and built apartments over it. So that's when I told him that my apartment building was built on a cemetery, and when I told him the address, he confirmed that was the cemetery he was talking about. Then he told me that when they built this apartment complex, they were supposed to relocate all the remains, but from what he heard, and he didn't have any way to back this up, but this is what he heard. Apparently, they had a problem. Several of the graves couldn't be identified correctly. The headstones were damaged, and record keeping wasn't that great back then, and there was so many people that passed away that they didn't know exactly who the bodies were. So some of the bodies were never moved. I felt like throwing up, and that's when I said to him, so there's still bodies under my apartment building? In my opinion, most likely. He then pulled up some photos online of what the original cemetery looked like. There was a special section marked with a unique symbol, the exact same design as the decorative stones in the yard of my building. So those weren't statues like the landlord told me. They were actual headstones from the Civil War. When I got back home that afternoon, I went to take a look at the headstones just to confirm that what he was saying wasn't crazy, and he was right. So the next time I saw Mrs. Kang, I decided to ask her about this, because now I thought I knew what she meant about respecting the land you're living on. And when I brought up how this place used to be a cemetery for fallen soldiers, she smiled and said that that was what she was talking about. She didn't go into any more detail about it, but I could tell from the way she was smiling that she also experienced some spooky stuff here. Or at the very least, she heard some stories. After learning this information, I knew I couldn't sleep there anymore. It wasn't my brain's fault that I was having these crazy dreams. So I packed my bags and slept over at my friend's house for a couple weeks before ultimately moving in with him. By the way, shout out to his original roommate who dropped out, leaving a room open for me. I appreciate you, bro. Once I moved into their place, the sleep paralysis nightmares completely stopped. Never had another one. So listen, I don't know how to explain what happened while I was living there. Honestly speaking, I do probably think that it was just sleep paralysis because it got better when I changed environments. But with all the coincidence that occurred while I was living there and my friend experiencing almost the same thing, I'll never know for sure. If you're a doctor or psychologist and can actually explain the psychology behind this, please let me know. But the one thing I do know is that you never want to disrespect the dead.